Everyone. I hope y'all are doing well. Welcome back to our third installment of Paul's trial, where we see him now before the governors Felix and eventually Festus. And he is progressively making his way through. But today, as we look at chapters 24 and 25 of the book of Acts in our study to the ends of the earth, what I really want us to pay attention to is kind of the importance of words, right? This is an interesting thing for us to deal with, but the things we say and how we say them matter. Obviously, this whole section you could just boil down to evangelism. You could boil down to sharing the gospel and having opportunities. But I think there are interesting ways that we see this displayed in all these different ways. So, starting off in Acts chapter 24, says 5 days later, Ananias, the high priest, came down with some elders and a lawyer named Tertullus. Tertullus is some famed orator. He's a guy who's, they're bringing in to kind of help represent their case, but you're going to see a lot about his and the Jewish, accusers' characters. So these men presented their case against Paul to the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus began to accuse him and said, "We enjoy great peace because of you, and reforms are taking place for the benefit of this nation because of your foresight. We acknowledge this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix, with utmost gratitude. But so that I will not burden you any further, I request that you would be kind enough to give us a brief hearing." So we start off, and it's just flowery, flattery language. And flattery is one of these interesting things when we look at like false speech in Scripture. False speech obviously can mean lying, right? This guy is green, right? Things like that. But false speech also applies in different ways. Flattery is a deceptive, sinful use of false speech, right? It is buttering someone up. It is trying to make someone more favorable to you. It's deceit is what it is, right? And Felix, this guy that they're saying, "Oh, we enjoy great peace because of you, the benefits to our nation. Oh man, every way and everywhere we, acknowledge you and we have gratitude." Felix is an awful person. Felix hated the Jews. He had animosity towards them. He was not favorable to them. He would actually be removed from his position in large part because of this relationship that was so bad with the Jews, right? So this is a lie. This is flattery. And Felix is probably even aware of this. He's like, "Man, we don't get along. What are you talking about?" And then he's like, "All right, let me get to the point. Let me make sure that let's make this brief because you can just agree with us," right? It says, "For we have found this man to be a plague, an agitator among all the Jews throughout the Roman world." What a compliment to Paul. Hey, congrats. He made it to all the Jews in the Roman world. Good on you, right? "And a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes." This is meant to be a dig at Paul. This is saying like, hey, this guy he's a threat to the Roman world. They don't, the Romans don't like these little sects and these religious cults like uprising. They see them as threats. There wasn't a lot of favorable nature towards Christians, right? And especially as time would go on, that was true and truer. But he's like this sect of the Nazarenes. If you remember the words of one of Jesus' disciples, he says, like, "What can anything good come from Nazareth, from right?" Like, no, like Nazareth is not a well thought of place, and says like trying to associate some like negative cult vibes from this, and he's like, he's an agitator. It's not true. Paul is never doing these things. The Jews are the agitators toward Paul, right? He's a threat to the Romans. Paul's a Roman citizen. He's not breaking Roman laws, right? So he's trying to deceive them. He's using his words to deceive Tertullus. It says he even tried to desecrate the temple, and so we apprehended him. The actual charge brought up against Paul, right, that he desecrated the temple, that he was dishonoring it. And so we apprehended him. By examining him yourself, you will be able to discern the truth about these charges we are bringing against him. The Jews also joined in the attack, alleging that these things were true. What's interesting here, in all of these charges against Paul, there is no evidence brought in. There is no witnesses. There are no ways that they can back up their claims because you can't provide evidence to a crime that never happened. They're like, Paul desecrated the temple. That's the charge against Paul. But that never actually happened. Otherwise, they would be able to prove it. They'd be able to bring people in. And so what you're seeing here is the same thing that happened with Stephen, the same thing that happened with Jesus, right? False witnesses. These are all different kinds of speech that are harmful, right? that go under the like umbrella term of thou shalt not lie, right? But they're all the same. It's all different, but it's all the same. And so Tertullus is revealing his character, this man who is supposedly, speaking lawfully on behalf of the Jews who care about the law and who care about morality. They're depending on lies, on untruths. This is revealing their character. They don't care about God, the God they care to serve, that they claim to serve, because if they did, they would stand on truth. And immediately, we see the difference when we go towards Paul's defense. In verse 10, it says, when the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied, because I know you have been a judge of this nation for many years, I'm glad to offer my defense in what concerns me. This is Paul's way of talking to Felix. He doesn't butter him up. He doesn't flatter him. He just says, I know that you've been a judge of this nation for many years, and so I'm glad to offer my defense before you because you are judging this nation. He's not making any false claims. He's not trying to say that things are, he just say, hey, you are the judge of these people, so I'm glad to do this. This is great for me, right? It says you can verify for yourself that it's no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship in Jerusalem. They didn't find me arguing with anyone or causing a disturbance among the crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogues or anywhere in the city. Neither can they prove the charges they are now making against me. Paul lays out a very clear legal argument. He's got an alibi. He's got proof, and he's got witnesses. So you can verify it for yourself. The Jews can verify it. All my friends can verify it. The Romans and the Gentiles can verify it. I've only been here 12 days. And if you kind of do the math on this, right? He's been in custody for 5 days. Before that, that's when the mob happened, and they started because Paul went back to the temple after a week, which is 7 days, right, of doing these purification rites, and he's worshiping, he's bringing alms, right, and he'll talk about that in a little bit. But he's like, hey, all of what I did is verifiable, and they can't prove any of the charges because they're making them up, right? I was not causing a disturbance. I was chilling, right? And so this is Paul. He's like, hey, this is what happened, and you can verify this. You're not going to just have to depend on me. Like the Jews were like, interrogate Paul. He'll basically he'll condemn himself with his words is what they're hoping. And Paul's like, no, like you can verify everything that just happened, right? It says, but I admit this to you. I worship the God of my ancestors according to the way, which they call a sect, believing everything that is in accordance with the law and written in the prophets. I have a hope in God, which these men also, or themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection, both of the righteous and the unrighteous, right? Paul immediately begins to link everything he has done to his faith. He's like, hey, all these people who are accusing me, and they're saying, oh, he's a dangerous member of a dangerous sect, this offshoot of the religion, this cult. Paul is actually saying, hey, I'm actually arguably the most Jewish of any of them because I believe the thing that they claim to believe and to put their hope in, right? All of them, the things that are written in the law, the things that are written in the prophets, pointing ahead towards the Messiah, pointing ahead towards the resurrection of the dead, both of the unrighteous and the righteous in judgment. I believe in that. And I believe that I found the reason for that, right? He does not actively say Jesus' name here, but when he says, I worship the God of my ancestors according to the way, that's what Christianity was called, basically, because Jesus is the way to follow Judaism to its fullest extent. He is the way to eternal life. He is the way to everything, right? He is the fulfillment of everything the Jews believed. And Paul is saying, hey, I believe everything that these guys believe. I just believe it to its natural conclusion. And so he's like, we're not even different. They just don't believe that Jesus is the fulfillment of this, which this means I have found what they're looking for. It says, I always strive to have a clear conscience toward God, and after many years, I came to bring charitable gifts and offerings to my people. While I was doing this, some Jews from Asia found me ritually purified in the temple, without a crowd and without any uproar. It is they who ought to be here before you to bring charges if they have anything against me, right? Paul saying, hey, I've strived. I want to live in peace. I want to live in good conscience. I want to follow the law. I want to act in righteousness and morality in front of God and men. I haven't broken any Roman laws. I haven't broken any Jewish laws. I actually came back to Jerusalem to bring gifts and offerings from all these people who I've met over my different missionary journeys to help the people in Jerusalem. Isn't that a thing that you would want to happen if you were in Jerusalem? Yeah, I would assume so, right? He's saying, this is what I came to do. And I went to the temple and I was ritually purified because I had been with Gentiles and I had done all these things and I was observing the correct law by them to go to the temple, to worship, to do all these things. I wasn't causing an uproar. They actually found me. The people who've been chasing me around Asia, the people who've been chasing me around all these things, they found me and they started that riot. If anyone should be should be under, trial, it should be them. And if they want to bring a charge against me, why are they not here? It's because they can't bring anything against Paul. And this is what he's saying. He's very logical. He's using his words in truth. He's leaning on what is good and true and right and holy. It says, or let these men hear, the people who are currently there, state what wrongdoing they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Other than this one statement, I shouted while standing among them, today I am trial before you concerning the resurrection of the dead. Paul's like, you know what? Probably the only thing that I made a mistake in was when I was before the Sanhedrin, which is including Pharisees and Sadducees. I mentioned how I'm on trial before you concerning the resurrection of the dead. That caused a stir, and I probably should have known better, right? I probably should have said something else. But that's the only kind of mistake that I've made, and that's the only thing that they could claim that I've done wrong. But I've not desecrated the temple. I've not broken any Jewish laws. I've not broken any Roman laws. He's standing on what is true, and Felix knows it. Everyone knows it. They know that Paul is innocent. In the same way that Pontius Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent, so does Felix. There is no reason to put Paul to death. There's no reason to keep him in, chains. There's no reason to do any of this. But there he remains, right? We continue on. And in verse 22, right, it says, since Felix was well informed about the way. Felix, he knew what Christianity was. He knew about this, right? This is happening in his area. He's got to be informed, right? He adjourned the hearing, saying, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will decide your case. He's just trying to pass the buck. He doesn't want to make a decision, right? He ordered that the centurion keep Paul under guard, though he could have some freedom, that he should not prevent any of his friends from meeting his needs or visiting him, right? He knows that Paul's innocent. Why else would he's like, we're going to keep Paul under, we're going to keep him locked up, but, he can move around and he can have a lot of freedom and his friends can come and visit him, right? This isn't actual imprisonment. It's, it is, like, he's definitely not free to just leave. But, like, he knows he's innocent, so he can't really do too much against him, and he's going to, allow him some freedoms. You would not allow freedoms to a person that you believe to be guilty. It just doesn't make sense. But we'll figure out kind of what's going on a little bit later. It says, several days later, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and listened to him on the subject of faith in Christ Jesus. Now, Felix, not just a guy who's antagonistic to Jews, but he also... his marriage, history, his sexual history is suspect at best, right? So there's this woman, Drusilla, who is a Jew, who is a young, beautiful woman, and she was married to a different man. And Felix seduces her out of that marriage to become his third wife, right? So there's a lot of weird, interesting, interplays here, and a lot of stuff where it's it's not great. So Felix knows all this, but he knows that his wife is Jewish. He's going to have some history with the faith. And so maybe she's interested. Maybe he wants her opinion on things so that she can speak from a Jewish perspective about Paul and about Jesus, and if he is the continuation of the Jewish faith and any things like that. Who knows? And Paul could easily do what so many preachers do, which is just say what is agreeable, say what's easy, and build favor with Felix, right? To just say oh man, let me tell you about this. Let me affirm you. Let me, not call you out for your sin. But that's not what Paul does. Instead, it says, now as he spoke about righteousness and self-control and the judgment to come, Felix became afraid and replied, leave for now, but when I have the opportunity, I'll call for you. Paul, you could easily say this as Paul saying, like, hey, he's speaking about the righteousness of Jesus Christ, that he fulfilled the righteousness of the law so that we have the righteousness of Jesus, and now we are made righteous before God. And self-control, being like, hey, we are, because we have the righteousness before God, because Jesus has saved us, we're called to live a certain way, to take certain actions and do certain things. He could be talking about the judgment to come, a thing that he's already mentioned in his previous message, right? That, hey, one day, like, it's important for us to believe in Jesus now because he's coming back one day and he's coming to judge. This could be Paul just sharing the gospel, and I'm sure he is sharing the gospel in this moment, in this one-on-one and one-on-two conversation. But he's also incredibly pointed. He's looking at a man who is on his third wife, who seduced a woman away from her own marriage to marry him instead. And he's talking about righteousness. He's talking about self-control. He's talking about judgment, of not knowing God and walking with God. This is incredibly pointed. Paul is actively calling out Felix's sin, and Felix is aware of it. He knows enough about the way, right? It says he's familiar with it. He knows about the truth of Jesus. Paul is sharing. He's not just saying, hey, Jesus meets you where you're at and you can just stay like that forever. He's saying, no, you have to leave sin and pursue Jesus instead. You have to walk with him. That's why Felix became afraid. It's why he leaves. He's uncomfortable with the conversation. He doesn't like what's happening, and so he bails. He could make a decision. He could release Paul. He knows he's innocent. He knows he's free, but he's scared. On a spiritual note, he could make a decision. He knows about Jesus. He's heard about him. He might even believe it in some way. Like, he's afraid. He's hearing the truth of Jesus, that not just does Jesus save us, but he saves us from our sin, which without Jesus will condemn us to death. And right now, Felix is without Jesus, and he will be condemned to death one day. And so he's afraid. And there's an imperative nature to salvation. I think so often we and other people think, oh man, I'll get to it. Like, I'll accept Jesus. I can do this another time, or I'm just not feeling it right now. No. Every time the gospel is shared in the Bible, every time we see these examples, there is a urgent nature. Accept Jesus now. The kingdom of heaven is near. Jesus is returning soon. We don't know. It could be today. It could be a long time from now, but it could happen imminently. And so we have a necessity to respond to the gospel quickly. But Felix doesn't. He delays. He hesitates. He kicks the can down the curb, right? Says, I'll get to that, right? And I'll call for you. Spiritually, he's delaying. He doesn't see the urgency here. But to Paul's legal situation, again, it says at the same time, he was also hoping that Paul would offer him money, send him a bribe. Hey, make this worth it for me. Flatter me and my wife in our decisions. Give me a little bit of cash and I'll just set you free. Who cares? Who cares about those Jews, right? Whatever, right? He's hoping for a bribe. And so he sent for him quite often and conversed with him. He's having these conversations, and Paul, you bet, is probably telling him about the salvation of Jesus Christ that is necessary for him every time. And every time, Felix just wants a little bit of sweetness, right? He wants a little bit of cash. He wants a little bit of personal touch here. And Paul never gives it to him. Paul speaks what is true. He leans on what is true and right and holy, and that is what he depends on always. And Felix never gets what he wants from Paul. This is after 2 years had passed. Porcius Festus succeeded Felix, and because Felix wanted to do the Jews a favor, he left Paul in prison. Felix, though he hates the Jews, he's trying to, that's the people he kind of is ruling over, and he wants to build some favor with them. So what does he do? He leaves Paul in prison, even though he knows that he is innocent. And once he is removed from office, and a guy named Porcius Festus succeeds him, that's who we now move to our final section of this passage in the first part of Acts chapter 25. It says, 3 days after Festus arrived in the province, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. The chief priests, and again, this is after 2 years of Paul being in prison, of him just waiting, right? It says the chief priests and the leaders of the Jews presented their case against Paul to him, and they appealed, asking for a favor against Paul that Festus summon him to Jerusalem, that they were in fact preparing an ambush along the road to kill him. This new governor, he goes and visits the people in Jerusalem, one of the most important cities in the area, and he's knows that this Paul situation is a big deal. So he meets with the leaders. They say, hey, bring him to Jerusalem. We want to try him here because it has to do with Jewish law, right? In reality, they want to kill him. And Festus may or may not know about this, but he says, Festus, however, answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea. He's like, why would I do that? I'm going to keep him where I am and where I live, and that he himself was about to go there shortly. Therefore, he said, let those of you who have authority go down with me and accuse him if he has done anything wrong. He's like, hey, if y'all care about this, y'all need to come to Caesarea. I'm not moving Paul back and forth. This isn't what's happening, right? And so again, we see God's divine protection of Paul through the Romans, through his enemies in this moment, through his captors and imprisoners, that he is still protecting Paul, and he's keeping him safe, and he is allowing him to fulfill purpose. Verse 6 says, when he had spent not more than 8 or 10 days among them, he went down to Caesarea. The next day, seated at the tribunal, he commanded Paul to be brought in. When he arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him and brought many serious charges that they were not able to prove. Again, they're bringing up all these things, but they have no evidence because there is no evidence. They have no proof because there is no proof. They cannot talk about what Paul did because there is no crime. It says, then Paul made his defense, neither against the Jewish law, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I sinned in any way. But Festus, he's a new guy. He's a good guy, historically speaking. Seems like he was a dude who was fair. He's still a politician. And he says, but Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, replied to Paul, are you willing to go to Jerusalem to be tried before me there on these charges? He's like, hey, we both know that this is ridiculous, but would you be willing to go to Jerusalem? And he's not commanding Paul to go to Jerusalem. Paul's a Roman citizen. So he's like, hey, would you be willing to do this there? Maybe this will get these guys from the Sanhedrin off my back, but would you want to go there? And we can talk about the Jewish faith there. And Paul knows what's up. He knows these guys want to kill them. And he also knows that he's not going to Jerusalem. He's not going backwards. He's going to Rome. So Paul replied, I'm standing at Caesar's tribunal, where I ought to be tried. I have done no wrong to the Jews, even as you yourself know very well. If then I did anything wrong and am deserving of death, I'm not trying to escape death. But if there is nothing to what these men accuse me of, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar. And then after Festus conferred with his council, he replied, you have appealed to Caesar you will go. What this means, he's not actually appealing to go to directly Caesar himself, to Emperor Nero, right? Kind of, but it's more like he's going to the Roman courts. He's going to the highest Roman law. Eventually, Paul will be brought before Nero, but it won't be great for Paul, right? But he's like, no, you know I'm innocent. I know I'm innocent. All these people know I'm innocent. Why would I go to them, right? If I've done nothing wrong, then I need to hear that. But if I have done something wrong, let me be tried in the court of law, where it's going to be fair, where it's going to be true. And if I have done something wrong, I will gladly take my licks, right? I will, if I'm deserving of death, kill me. If I'm deserving of imprisonment, imprison me, right? But if I've done nothing wrong, they're not going to be the ones who say that, because they are partial judges. They're biased. Let me go to impartial, fair judges, the Roman courts, democracy, right? I appeal to Caesar. I want to go to Caesar. I want to go to Rome. That's what God has been calling Paul to. He says, you are going to testify about me in Rome. Jesus said, that's where you're heading. You're going to speak to Jews and Gentiles and kings. Next chapter, next passage, we're going to see him begin to speak to kings, and he's eventually going to to come before Emperor Nero. This is all part of God's plan to reach new peoples. But in this, I want us to consider how our words are important. How have your words been harmful before? Do you have a tendency towards specific speech patterns and false speech patterns that are harmful, that are ungodly, that don't represent the Lord well? Flattery, deceit, false witness, right? Do you use your words to harm? Maybe you speak what is true, but it is discouraging and it is mean-spirited. That's the same, principle as using untrue words to harm, right? It's all, are you causing harm with your words? Are there things that you need to be careful in the way you speak? Are you misrepresenting Jesus, right? These people who are accusing Paul, they are misrepresenting Yahweh. They are lying. They are deceitful. That is not who God is. He is true, but they're representatives of him. Paul stands on what is true and what is good. He is representing Jesus' word. He's actually defending the faith well, too. He knows the faith better than what is being presented by these Jews. Are our speech patterns honoring God, or are they dishonoring him? Are the things we're doing harming other people, or are they building people up and caring for them, allowing them to see the love of Jesus and the truth of Jesus? That's what I encourage y'all to think about in your own life and to call your students to this week. I hope y'all are enjoying this passage. We only got 2 more studies after this week. We're making our way to the end of Acts, and we're about to hit a roller coaster here. So I hope y'all are enjoying it, and I cannot wait to see you next week. Peace out.